Alrighty.
Oh, damn.
Three.
Okay, we are live whenever you're ready to start.
All right. It is now 7 o'clock. I will call our meeting to order. Actually, Emily, are we good to go?
We're good to go.
Great. Thank you for everybody tuning in to the East Lansing City Council discussion only special meeting today, Thursday, August 7th. We're going to hope to get you out of here pretty quickly. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Bacon.
Present.
Councilmember Watson.
Councilmember Watson?
She did warn us that her internet might cut out.
I think she
It
froze.
looks like hers is frozen.
Oh, dang.
So
I answered that she's present.
Yeah, she is here.
yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Greg.
I'm here.
Mayor
Thank-
Stevens.
Here. Great. So our next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'm going to make a motion for this. I'll ask for a second, but I will make it with one tiny amendment that we may actually take a vote on discussion item 4.1 just to simply define who those that we want to interview are. It is going to be a discussion. We're not going to be making a decision on who we are going to select for the city attorney here, but we might take some kind of formal action to say these are the folks that we're going to interview. So that is my motion in a very roundabout way. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Dana, are you there?
Give her a second to come back in.
Yep. Yep, I can hear you. All right. I believe that was a vote. And all those opposed, same sign. Great. That passes. Our next item on the agenda is communications with the audience. Emily and Nicole.
All right, we currently have one caller for the phone number ending in 963. Phone number ending in 963. You are now welcome to address council.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Hi, this is Alice Traeger. Just with regard to access, and this might help Councilmember Watson, I think if she dials in by phone, she may find that it's easier to actually connect than trying to use the internet sometimes. When you guys have been having problems with the feed, I noticed this with DDA today too, there's a reference to a YouTube feed. And I'm not sure what everybody's talking about. So I just wanted to tell you from a viewer standpoint what I'm aware of with regard to how we can access these meetings that are ongoing. We can dial in by the phone and use the access number and listen that way, which is a pretty stable, good way to listen. We can also use the website portal at the city's page and hit play on that video. So we can't join on YouTube, on Zoom unless you've given us the access for Zoom, which you're not doing understandably because of Zoom bombing. So sometimes when there's a reference to people being able to join by Zoom, that's actually only true if they've been given the access code, which again, I understand you're not doing because of Zoom bombing. So I'm not exactly sure what the reference is to YouTube, and I'm wondering if there's some other way that people might be able to watch that we're not being made aware of. Maybe you could spread that information. It might allow more people to access. And the other issue is that I'm not sure if it's still broadcasting on channel 22. And so it might be useful to tell people whether or not that's happening. So that was just my suggestion is just, I realize we're several months in, but I'm actually genuinely still confused about how this works. Thank you. And you can turn me off. Thank you.
Thanks. George, actually, would you mind talking about the YouTube stream versus the website?
Yeah, so I understood that it was basically the stream that gets it to cable, but I'd have to ask Emily Gordon for an explanation of the YouTube issue.
Okay.
Emily?
Hey, just comment. We do have a YouTube channel, and I think for me, one of the benefits of that is that you can subscribe to it, and so then it will like notify you when things are happening, but also it plays over other things. So like when I tune into a meeting that I'm not part of, I prefer to do YouTube because the audio just works better if I'm like walking around with my phone or something. So it is we have a YouTube channel. It simulcasts the meetings onto the YouTube channel, and it is one other way. And some people who habitually tune in that way might not realize there's other ways. So,
And of course, it doesn't work if you're participating in the meeting because the timing is
Right.
off. So
It's
that's
only
the
to
thing-
watch.
That's why none of us can use the YouTube, because the broadcast comes like 3 seconds later or 5 seconds later. So we would keep missing what's said. So that's why we have to use the Zoom and not mix it up with the YouTube. Emily, anything to add to that in terms of YouTube? Is the YouTube part of the part that gets it to the head end to stream to cable? Or
Yeah.
they're completely separate?
Yeah, so we have to use YouTube as our platform, basically, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
YouTube gets the information from Zoom, and then we connect YouTube to iCompass. So everything is run through YouTube. So if you were to log on or just simply search City of East Lansing, you would see that we're also streaming on YouTube, and that basically gets inputted onto iCompass. And then we also broadcast to channel 22, and we stream the YouTube feed through that, and it's embedded in the city's portal.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Basically,
So
I think that
YouTube is our
iCompass-
platform for everything.
Yeah, because iCompass relies on YouTube because it has such robust video capabilities. So iCompass hosts and uses our videos through YouTube, is my understanding of what iCompass does.
Yep. So when our problems were arising and we were mentioning YouTube, it was because YouTube would not connect with anything else. And so we couldn't make our stream work. And so that's why YouTube kept being brought up. We basically can't use anything unless we have YouTube.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. And appreciate troubleshooting problems when we've had them too, which unfortunately have happened recently, but I will say over the past, several months that we've been doing this, we have run into limited issues, which is good, because I've seen a lot of other people run into bigger ones. So thank you for that. All right, our next item on the agenda is our only discussion item, which is consideration of the submitted proposals for city attorney. Now, this is going to be a discussion and hopefully a decision on who to interview at the next meeting next Thursday. And I believe that meeting is being held at 6 p.m. Is that correct, George?
Correct. It's posted for 6 p.m.
Great. So we're going to be interviewing folks at that meeting. But right now we're just discussing who to interview. These are all the responses. If you look on the agenda item, all the responses that we got. We're going to have an open discussion about this, talk about who we want to interview. Ron, Councilmember Bacon, I think had some interesting things to say about like how many, he was preferencing, and I've heard some different things from different council members. So we're going to talk about it here and then hopefully move forward next week. So I'll just pass around the horn and I'll start with Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, I just kind of looking at the list and just trying to narrow it down just in interviewing in general. I always prefer if we can narrow it to, if we can get to 4, we can probably get to 3. So we have the right amount of contrast and that kind of thing. 4, I think is a little cumbersome as far as, if we get down to 2 that are pretty close together, I think we just get down and debate those 2 and get down to 3. If we can come to an agreement that 3 is the correct number, it just feels really comfortable. It's a good way to interview. And I just think it just creates good context.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'm fine with paring it down to 3 folks, or sorry, not 3 folks, 3 firms to interview. Any other thoughts on that?
that seems doable. I've got 4 on my list. I guess I'll figure out which one I'm not attached to, or maybe we can kind of.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
So Dana just called me and is having problems. Can we just see if she can speak for a second? She's not getting
Absolutely.
video.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Dana, can you unmute and try to speak and we can see if we can hear you? Looks like you're still muted.
That is probably some internet issues. Would we be able to have her call in instead, so that, I know that video is necessary sometimes,
Yeah.
but
Let me, Emily?
Just have to make noise every once in a while so we know she's still there.
Emily?
I believe the call-in number was on the invitation that would have been sent to Councilmember Watson.
So Dana, if you go to your smartphone, open the email, there'll be a one-tap iPhone number that'll have 2 numbers separated by commas. If you press that and then the passcode, which I can't give you now, it's on the email though, that will get you in by phone. And then you can hear the full conversation and talk
All right, we'll take a really quick hiatus. I don't want necessarily the break screen on there, but we'll just wait for a second to make sure Councilman
Give me a
Burke-
second to call her to see if I can, I'll text her to see if she's doing that. Hold on.
Great.
I just went ahead and resent the invitation, George, so that should be the newest thing in our inbox.
Great.
Thanks, Emily.
Dana, we do see you now, just so you know. I don't know if the
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
I just it's been MetroNet has been glitchy all day.
That's
So
all good.
If
Do you think
if
I
you
should
lose
try to
us,
call in?
if you lose us, I think you should have the phone and then do that one tap dial thing. And then maybe don't worry about video, just talk through the phone, but you need the passcode, which is in the email that Emily sent you. So it should be in that. I
Right.
think that's probably the best thing if you lose video again, what to do, try.
Okay.
Okay.
And then Dana, just so you know, I do have spotty internet as well, so that I take a lot of the meetings at City Hall. You're more than welcome to we can a separate room, obviously, but
Yeah, sometimes I camp out in the council room and he's in the council office.
Yeah, I think she locked up again.
Oh.
Maybe she'll call.
I also, it probably doesn't do her any good right now, but when my kids are home and streaming, I hotspot my computer with my phone. So I don't know if that would be an option that we could get her a hotspot
Yeah, check.
so that she had a second source of internet data.
The joys of technology.
sorry guys,
Yeah.
we're troubleshooting. We'll get back to you in just a second.
I would also say that even if Councilmember Watson can only join as an attendee, I can promote her to a panelist. So if that helps as well, if she calls in via phone.
Great.
Let's see, she's back. Let's see if, can you unmute and speak, Dana, so we can see if we can hear you?
Hi. Wait, were you
Hey,
talking
Dana.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, I think I should call in. I mean, I can keep, if I should keep the video on, I can, or.
No, it's
but I
all
think-
good. Just call in. I think we'll be fine.
So I'm trying to do it. My stuff isn't, really connected to my phone. So I gotta do some forwarding and stuff, but.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
We'll wait
Not a
on you.
problem.
It's all good. Don't worry about it.
Important conversation. Want to have you here for it.
And so I can hear right now and see you guys, and so I can, okay, actually.
Do you think it works better with the internet if you just leave your video off? Is it less data or something? I don't know how it works. That
Okay,
I sense.
Like, I don't know, but. I'm calling in right now.
Okay. We can hear you pretty clearly through what you got right now too as well, but I don't know if that means that it'll cut out in a little bit. So
Yeah, I pressed the wrong button because it says I'm an attendee.
oh, we can let you in through the
We can
attendant.
let you in.
I'll
as
go
a-
ahead and are you at the phone number ending in 074?
Go ahead and let her in. Yeah.
Mute.
And then Dana, if you go ahead and unmute your phone, we can see if we can hear you.
Might have to do *6 or #6, *6.
Star 6, yep.
Dana? You just
Yeah.
unmuted yourself. Great. We can hear
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
That's, yeah, okay.
Perfect.
Now I know why people have problems.
you. Yeah, it is
Sorry,
all
everybody.
good.
Okay.
We've all been
Okay.
through
That's
a
good
Zoom
insight
problem
for
or
us.
two during this.
Yeah.
Awesome. So can you hear us clearly through the phone, and we can hear you
Yes.
obviously correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Then I will continue on with the discussion. Councilmember Bacon, did you still have something that you wanted to say on this, or?
No, that was it. Just attempting to. It wasn't like a directive or like something that's clinical or anything about it. I just think if we can get down to 3, it'll make the process a lot cleaner next week.
Yep.
So if we
Yeah,
get
that makes
one or
sense.
2 that are really close together, we just kind of debate through it and see if we can narrow it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Mayor Pro Tem, I believe you had something as well.
Well, I've got 4 on my list, but I've been reviewing their proposals and kind of concentrating on differences instead of similarities. And so kind of clarifying my thoughts a little bit while we were getting started. Let's just dive into it. I'm good. Where is that? Where we
Councilmember
are?
Babcock? You're muted.
Sorry, the much better half might be walking in at any minute. I also have 4, and but we'll see how it goes, right?
I technically have 4 right now too, but I figured some other people might.
Okay.
Great. Good suggestion, Ron. Councilmember Watson? Dana, if you have thoughts on how many you think we should be interviewing.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I actually have 2
Okay.
and was open, and I've got everybody else's RFPs to hearing, about other people.
Great. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through each council member, ask them which ones they wanted to interview. We'll get this done a little bit quicker. I'm going to explain my thought process a little bit through mine. You guys feel free to explain yours as well. But yeah, so Councilmember Bacon, who'd you have?
Clark Hill.
Yep.
Looking at kind of the economics of it and just knowing where we came from economically was kind of where it jumped out at me first, and that they're capitated. I like that. My questions along those lines were around kind of response time. It was something I was looking at, and actually had talked to George a little bit about the importance of response time, and I hadn't considered it quite from those terms. So that had me reconsider some of my things on making sure for any of us and council in general or city manager or whatever, how's their response time going to be to certain things. So that was kind of my pullback on that. And then how they're going to allocate. They're so big, how are they going to allocate their personnel to East Lansing and that kind of thing. It's like there's just a lot of chefs in that organization. So just kind of seeing which way that would go. But as far as I like their price points, I know they're a great firm from just other encounters, and just kind of curious to how they're going to pare it down and how they'll prioritize East Lansing and that kind of thing was my question for them.
Great.
In general. Foster Swift, just local, presuming there'd be, or not, I mean, just that they'd be able to be around and present for things. We have so many things pending that are going on around us right now. Trying to get a feel around their price point and that kind of thing would be my questions for them. And something I was sitting and thinking about, just kind of how people are going to treat travel time for us, even if they are traveling, or what they're doing for us, or this, that, and the other, and around dollars and cents. And then learn a little bit more about their work with municipalities and that the questions that we have as we pair into these questions and do that kind of thing. I think the questions will handle all that for us. And if I'm picking a third, Rossetti is my third. And them being a municipal law firm just sounds excellent to me. I think it just felt good to me. My downfall or my downside on them is distance and just responsiveness, and those kinds of things are primary to me. And then everything else I can work with depending on which way they operate and how they're going to be dedicated to us and that kind of thing. And I'll let them prove that through the interview process. I reviewed their decks and everything like that, but I never believed that until you answered an interview question. But all their stuff looked great on paper. So
Great.
those are my three.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. I had 4. I had Clark Hill. Again, they're local. They do great work. Charlie Lawler and I went to law school together. We both went nights, and during the day, he owned and operated the grocery store that used to be at Brookfield Plaza. Rings a bell. I can't recall the name of the grocery. So he knows East Lansing well. He's certainly a hard worker. I think they'd be really good. I had Brookover. George Brookover has an institutional knowledge that I think didn't come through as well in his proposal as it could have, but I think his institutional knowledge, I think his demeanor, his knowledge of the law, clearly Open Meetings Act, is valuable. Then I had Rosati. I hold Rosati in very high regard. It's Metro Detroit operations. It does a lot for local government there. Steve Jopich is, I think, the chair of the municipal law section, which means a lot. He can tap a lot even outside the firm. I was impressed by the thoroughness of their responses. They seem to know what a government would look for. We will not charge you for faxes. This matters to us in a way that it might not matter to others. We think about that. So I would very much like to have the Rosati firm come in for an interview. And in 4th place, actually I had a 4-5 tie, really. I narrowly edged out, I narrowly gave the edge to Foster Swift, although I have some concerns about them. It wasn't at Foster where the main attorney would actually be out of Milford, so actually resides in Milford. So that's something, but Foster is also a well-known firm, very involved in local issues. I liked Bloom Sluggett as well. They do all municipal law, and they're on the west side of the state. They represent Grand Haven, among others. But I thought with the distance and with charging for mileage and travel time, that would eat up a lot of hours. However, if we were but an hour west, they would have been right at the top of my list. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Councilmember Watson.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Okay. So my 2 picks were Brookover, because the firm is local, and they had planning commission experience, they had board experience, and just to quote, one of the things they said was the unmatched current and past knowledge of the city of East Lansing, its citizens, and local courts. And I saw that in what they said. And I realized that they are a firm of 2, but they talked about adding 3 members. I felt comfortable with that. And so they were my top pick, one of my 2, I mean. And then my second pick was Foster and Swift. And I hear what Lisa was saying. I did have questions about where the main attorney or attorneys for other groups too might be coming from or commuting from. But Foster and Swift had a remarkable list of cities they've represented, townships, And something I really liked about them was they do speaking engagements and publications, and a lot of it is stuff that has to do with our city, from marijuana law to open meetings acts to just an assortment of coverage and support I think they might be able to offer.
Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem.
Hi. Okay, I'll give you my 4, and then I'll give you my kind of like alternate. I think my top 2 would be the 2 large local firms. So that would be Clark Hill and Foster and Swift. I was intrigued by Clark Hill's pricing structure. I confess I did kind of concentrate my analysis in this first run on pricing because that's such an important thing for us.
Sure.
So one of the things that I liked about Clark Hill is that their fee cap was monthly, not yearly. And so I thought, I don't know, I just kind of liked the consistency of that. And then the idea that if we have, you know, like a really explosive month, that it would be kind of capped in that time period as opposed to capped over the year. So I thought that that actually might work out better for us. When you multiply out their monthly fee, it ends up at 504,000, which is right in with what a lot of the other ones were listed at. So I thought, and then just having a firm that's based locally, I thought that would give them kind of a better knowledge. And then partially my, you know, what I think our scope of work in the city is so broad that having a larger firm with more depth of experience, I think is actually going to work out well for us. So I really concentrated on the larger operations. So of the 2 not East Lansing area based, I found Rosati's proposal to be more compelling than Bloom Sluggott's proposal, but I felt kind of similar on both of them. I guess moving back to Foster and Swift for a second, they were the only one of my 4 that was a completely open-ended contract where it was just an hourly billing and there was no cap, which makes me nervous. So, you know, if we end up talking to them, I think we really have to dig in on that and talk about that, because in that sense, like, we're going to have to impose the cap ourselves because we can't just have a completely open-ended, like, so we'll kind of have to assess, I don't know. So, okay, moving on. And then my 5th, my kind of honorary 5th place was Brookover. I liked the local aspect. I liked the knowledge of just East Lansing and some of the unique problems to East Lansing. His pricing structure was not great, I don't think. So instead of being an hourly fee, it was a flat rate divided over 12 months, and it was 516,000. So I think like our current contract is authorized up to a certain amount, but we have not billed to the full amount. I think last year was 450,000. So committing to a number that's on the high end and is just a flat fee, I don't think that's great for us. So that's why he wasn't in my top 4. So really Clark Hill and Foster Swift are my top 2. And then Rosati is my 3rd, just because I found their proposal to be slightly more compelling. And then Bloom, and then Brookover. So
great. And I'll kind of run through my reasoning, and then I'll go through my folks. Oh, I'm seeing Georgia, I might just have an edit on my screen, but are you attempting to speak right now?
Me?
Yes.
No, I didn't do anything. What did I do?
Okay, my bad. Then it must just be on my Zoom screen. My bad. Just didn't want to talk over you, man. That's all.
Thank you.
So I kind of based it on a couple of things. Obviously, cost was, you know, a huge factor in this. You know, experience in municipal government is, you know, another. I looked specifically at places that have represented cities in the past. You know, we deal with a lot of different complex issues, and I think that, you know, it makes sense to have a firm with some institutional knowledge in that. Speaking of institutional knowledge, also, I do value having somebody local. It's not an end all be all for me, but at the end of the day, like, we're dealing with a lot of different situations here in East Lansing. So having a history here is important. So if I had to put it down to three, my three would be Clark Hill, Foster Swift, and Rosati. And I will say I have different questions for each of them. One of my biggest things, and Councilmember Bacon, I think, really hit the nail on the head when he said this, but it's response time. And when I think about a question that I can ask, I think about real world situations that I've encountered where, we need answers. So if it's 6 p.m. and it's an hour before a council meeting and I have a question about something that's on the agenda, right? And I need a clarification on whether or not we can do something, I need to have some faith that if I give somebody a call, I can get an answer to that. And I know that that's a high bar, right? I understand that, and I understand that something, but things come up in municipal government very, very frequently. I want to make sure that our staff is able to have somebody that is responsive, so that they can do the work that they need to do. So I'd say that out of my priorities, responsiveness is going to be a really big one when you take away some similar qualifications. So anyway, so my three again, Foster Swift, Clark Hill, and Rosati. Although I will say, all of you mentioned other ones that were fairly high on my list. So if we want to do a 4, I'm more than happy to select that. But so at this point, what I'm seeing from folks is at least everybody on this list had Foster Swift. So I think that we can safely say that we're going to interview Foster Swift. Everybody except for one person had Clark Hill. So I would say that is a safe bet on interviewing. And then if we're just doing 3, then we had some kind of distinction really between 3 firms. It would be Brookover, Rosati, and Bloom. So those are, I think if we maybe we want to have 4, maybe we want to have 3, but those are the 3 that I also heard. So I'm happy to have a conversation on that a little bit further.
Yeah, I think based on Lisa's comments, I guess her internal knowledge of Brookover as she was speaking made me, with the local connection, I'll see the connection there. The price structure, I don't love it, and what seemed like lack of maybe size, but that may give us more intimacy. There's kind of a catch there, and just the depth of knowledge of the community and that part of it, at least articulated, made me more considerate of them than I probably was before, based on just the proposal. So she had some color and some context to it. So I not that I would eliminate Rosati, but if we didn't come to conclusion, Rosati's still above them. But if we had to go to 4 in order to give proper consideration to someone in that local setting, I'd be open to that. I had kind of dismissed them a little bit based on their proposal, but Lisa's color brought me back. So
Lisa, go ahead. Lisa, you're muted.
Thank you. I have a question. I don't know if it's for the mayor or for Mr. Lahanas. So through the mayor, possibly to Mr. Lahanas. Can we discuss the financial terms in an interview, or is that cast once it?
I think you're free to discuss it, because I think you can negotiate.
Okay.
After you guys select somebody, I think you ask them for a contract, and then you have to go back and approve a contract. So I think you can say to them, how do you charge travel? How do you charge this? How do you charge that? Will you give us a flat rate instead of an associate, a senior partner, and give us one rate? I mean, I think you can do all that.
Okay. Good. I just want to be fair to everyone.
Yeah.
And I will say, Mr. Brookover's local. I've called him about various things over the years. I've never had him not call me right back. I will say that on his behalf, but I'm in the interview 4 camp, which would include both Rosati and Brookover. So
Other thoughts on that? Mayor Pro Tem or Councilmember Watson?
Well, I was really thinking 3 was a nice shorter council meeting, so I was kind of hoping that we could go with 3. But you know, I would be fine with 4 if that made this decision less painful.
Councilmember Watson?
Well, just wanted to point out again for Brookover, Lisa, Councilperson Babcock talked about the firm's turnaround, and the firm talked about returning calls and inquiries within 2 hours, and I thought that was pretty awesome. And I'm going through the other people again. Is it, well, possibly Clark Hill, but it's Rosati and Bloom that we're also thinking about?
Yes. Bloom was,
right.
we'll say Bloom was only mentioned specifically by Mayor Pro Tem Greg as kind of her tie 4th, 5th, if I'm not correct.
Okay.
Is that a accurate description, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, Bloom was my definite 4th.
My bad.
You know, with Brookover as the possible alternate.
And I believe Councilmember Babcock as well indicated that she was interested in their proposal, but narrowly edged out from another firm.
I fell in the same issue with it. Lisa had kind of, if the proposal was actually pretty decent, if they'd fallen into a little bit more even 30 minutes versus 55 miles or 60 miles or whatever. I just think that with all the flanks and things we're opening right now, I just think that travel time and that calculating along with response time will probably not be what we're looking for. So that was my concern with that one too. And if I could move them 60 minutes each as well, I thought proposal wise they were good.
Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock. But then I do want to go back to Councilmember Watson because she asked a question.
Thank you. I will say that when we were interviewing council members, Mr. Bowman mentioned that he was in Grand Haven and they had signs about distancing and wearing a mask. And I was curious. So I found Jeff Sluggett, who was the Grand Haven city attorney. And I asked him if they had authority behind this. He said that no, it was more of a suggestion, but I did find him to be very helpful, very pleasant. And when I told him that we had RFPs for an attorney, I did forward it to him. No more than that, just a nicety, but I did find him very pleasant and helpful during that conversation, for what it's worth.
Great. Councilmember Watson.
I don't have anything else to say right now.
Okay. That is all good. So I will ask the question then. So it looks like we're going kind of back and forth between Brookover and Rosati. Go ahead.
I abandoned the kind of former position just for I can't in good conscience not consider a local firm, even if they'd be in my deep 4th position, but I think they have the right, so to speak, to represent themselves and present. I think it's good courtesy and good, they should be allowed to present.
Okay, great. So then I think our plan going forward is to interview 4 firms, those 4 firms being, please correct me if I am wrong, Foster Swift, Clark Hill, Rosati, and Brookover. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I will ask for then a formal motion on that, just to signify that those are the folks that we're going to interview. Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
I make a motion that the City Council interview 4 firms for the position of City Attorney, and that those firms are Clark Hill, Foster Swift, Rosati, Schultz, the Rosati firm, and Mr. Brookover. It used to be Johnson Rosati. They keep changing the name.
All right. Does that motion in a second? Oh, great. Seconded by Councilmember Watson. Any discussion on the item? Great. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Wonderful. And now on that agenda item, we did also say we wanted to talk about questions. So I have a little bit of a different view this time than I did maybe during the council interviews. Sorry, there's a fly running around me. I have different questions for each of these firms. I will be honest. Some, of course, have been mentioned before due to cost structure. Some I have questions about time and response time. Different questions about experience. And so I'm kind of looking for some guidance, maybe from even the city manager, who's an HR professional, or maybe Councilmember Bacon, who has a good amount of experience in business. What would be the most fair way to go about this? I mean, do we decide some baseline questions and then, leave room for individual council members to follow up? Or would we, just want to kind of play it by ear at that point and have council members figure out individual questions for these firms and then, just be asking them in public? So I'll look to city manager, maybe Councilmember Bacon, if you want to chime in.
I can just chime in quickly and say, I think it's reasonable to have several questions, maybe a very basic one of, could you please tell us your experience as it relates to, what we're looking for in a city attorney, and let them just speak about their experience to start off as a brief presentation for 3 or 5 minutes, and then ask several questions, have some standard questions, and then just have council ask all the questions they want at the end. Maybe try to keep it to 45 minutes total per, because that will keep you at 4 hours. I mean, less than 3 hours for interviews, an hour for deliberations. Hopefully you could get this all done in one night still.
Okay.
With scheduled breaks.
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, I totally agree that in fairness to everyone that we present the standard questions and then definitely get our specific questions, and we can even delegate who asks. If it's someone's specific question, maybe we pull them in and each one of us asks our specific concern, or if it's a concern of all of us as far as distance or dedicated, who's going to be dedicated to us or that kind of thing, we can kind of maybe pool those between now and the interview, and we can kind of ping pong them around and ask them. So
sure. George, just as a point of clarification, would we be allowed to do that?
So we can't talk about questions amongst the group and share that information back and forth. If they say they want, for instance, the mayor to have the questions and just anyone can forward questions to you to compile a couple of questions. If everyone has one question each, but you can't all share stuff together, look at it and keep adding to it and talking about it.
Got it.
That'd be deliberations. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You could appoint a couple of people to come up, finalize questions, but you can't have the whole group doing that.
Yeah, I don't think they're that complex, so maybe it won't be an issue. I'm sorry, Jesse.
Can I propose something?
Absolutely.
So we received via email a list of the questions that were asked during the last interview process. I did look through those and I thought that was pretty good. I liked kind of the casting of scenarios that have happened, the one, there's one, I don't know. I think anybody that's followed East Lansing for a while would recognize the scenarios that were outlined in the questions because they happen all over the time. So I thought that was helpful format. I think Aaron, would you be able to set a time to meet with me and you and I could maybe look at those questions, and then the other 3 council members, if they had things that they wanted to include, could they individually forward questions? Or is that too close to deliberation?
It seems like it's getting close. Perhaps they could just, if they have any additional questions they want, because you said there's going to be a free flow opportunity at the end, so that no one would be excluded, right?
Yeah.
You guys could ask your questions at the end and just say, my question is this, and I'm going to get to ask it to everybody. But maybe if you appoint people to actually discuss questions, you just leave 5 questions to start, and then the next 20 minutes is open questions from council members.
Yeah, I actually think that makes a lot of sense. If we, rather than deliberating on it, we would, because I think we all have individual questions that are different for each firm. So if we decided on let's say 5 questions right now, and based on what previous questions were, I do like the scenario based ones definitely, and I like the basic one that I think the city manager had said, and then we basically come with our own individual prepared questions. And, if somebody asks something that, you were going to ask, great, the question got answered, right? But I do think it would be good to have more of an open conversation and a little bit more follow-up with these folks, because, I think that there are, they might present something or say something in an answer that we want to be like, well, actually, can you dive into that a little bit, right? So does anybody have any suggestions on those like standard questions? George, sorry, City Manager Lahanas, did you have, you said 5 would be reasonable timeline-wise?
I'm just thinking that 5 would be hopefully 15 minutes if you give them about, let's just say it takes 3 or 4 minutes to answer a question, 15 to 20 minutes, and that gives you 15 or 20 minutes to get open-ended questions. And then hopefully at 40, 45 minutes, you're cutting everybody off and go to the next one. I think it would be good to try to give each one the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So that you're not giving someone an hour and a half and then someone ends up after 20 minutes, to maybe
Makes
say
sense.
at 40 minutes, it's a hard stop. But I think a good general one is tell us about your experience and background as it relates to serving as a city attorney for the city of East Lansing. And then that gives them a chance to talk about their firm, their degrees, the breadth of the firm, their expertise. It's kind of their introduction, right?
Yep.
These are lawyers. That's going to take 3 hours all by itself.
That's why you don't like to start. You have 40 minutes, so if they take 30 minutes with one question, you don't get to hear anything else from them, which would hurt them bad, I think. So
Yeah.
I
know. I just knew everyone was thinking that, so I thought I'd say it.
You're a lawyer, so you can
Yeah, we're tracking them by their hourly rate, so they should show us so that we're going to get our values.
So all right, so I have that question written down. Are there other suggested ones? Oh, Dana, sorry, I didn't pick you up.
Yeah, so I work for the health department and I've sat on a number of interviews. And so I'm kind of used to the questions being standard and making sure that there's fairness in the questions that we ask. And so I'm curious to know the different angles that might be taken based on the firms. And so are we talking about that today, or is that going to be in messages, or how do I understand that?
Could you clarify that question a little bit?
Yeah, so I wouldn't want anyone to feel like they got harder questions than someone else. And so because I'm coming from a place where we ensure that we ask the same questions, that if we add a question, it's added for every single person that we interview. And I realize that this is different for the law firms, but I'm coming from that mindset. And so I'm just curious about how I'm gonna know that, how I can be looped in.
Well, I did concentrate my first perusal through the things on the finances of it, because that was such an important part to me. So now that everyone has been decided, I will be going back through their applications with the finer tooth comb, but I can give you an idea of like what some of the differences might be from my perspective. Like, so Rosati is commuting in from Detroit and none of the other 3 would be. So that is a pretty significant difference that we would have to cover. Brookover has a very small firm that has much less municipal experience than the other 3 candidates. So that is something that I would definitely want to cover. Foster Swift's completely open-ended finance structure is of concern to me. So really like the differences between the applications, I think, the 3 big firms that have a very large municipal expertise, are going to be pretty similar in those types of questions. So where the differences are going to come up are because there's differences in the application. So I don't see that that's really not fair to the other people, because it's not applicable to the other people.
Yeah, I can probably help you a little bit with this one, Dana. View it kind of top down instead of bottom up. In the types of interviews, and I do a lot of the same type of interviews that you're discussing, the rate is set, the hours are set, everything's set, and it's kind of, so you're kind of going bottom up. We're coming top down, like they have different rates. It's more like hiring a consultant. So you can ask them unique questions, I think, because they're coming with unique proposals around how they're going to consult and how they're going to operate. So those questions are actually there to differentiate, versus we're not trying to trap them or pigeonhole them or anything like that. It's just to figure out what those differentiations are and what that really looks like in real life. So yeah, my first inclination too is not to catch anybody or slip them up or anything with any tricky questions, but we're trying to get to the bottom of their proposals versus, giving them, saying we pay $10 an hour, X amount of hours, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit different, I think.
Okay.
Also,
all right. And
to summarize that, I think that if you have the first 5 questions, if those tend to be the more technical, tell us, like from the list, tell us the time you handle this type of case, a zoning case, tell us about this from the list again. Those are the technical questions fairly for everybody. The other questions are how you guys want to interact with your city attorney. What's your response time? What's your travel time? What's your rates? What's your expectation of who's going to be assigned a city attorney? It's more of that. It's less about the technical, I think. Maybe you can handle the technical questions up front, and then there's equity on those tougher questions, if you will, right?
Okay. All right. And I'm a fan of each question being timed and them knowing possibly what their time frame is so that they don't escape themselves trying to answer, one question when they have 5 more questions to go. And I love asking questions, but obviously I haven't interviewed firms before, but I think I have great questions that I've come up with. But, I don't want to ask them if they're, I don't know, ridiculous or whatever. So how are we going to go about that part of it?
I don't think there are ridiculous questions. I think this is a really important thing. And I think, if you ask something and then the response is different than you were expecting and it's much simpler or much more complicated, that's a good thing to know. So I don't think we need to be self-conscious about that. I think having a time at the end for council members to kind of follow up with individual concerns would create that opportunity. And I certainly wouldn't. I don't know much about municipal law, so I'm probably going to ask something kind of dumb. That's why we need to hire an attorney.
There are no dumb questions, and how a prospective city attorney responds to a question that may be dumb will tell us a lot about how they're going to work with us, because that's going to happen sooner or later, right? So that there's real value in finding out what they consider a dumb question and how they treat us when we do that.
Councilperson Watson, I'm literally thinking the same thing, that because basically they're part of the team, and like there's going to be lots. I have dumb questions in my mind right now that I probably wouldn't want to ask, and I imagine members of the community might have those same questions, just like and it's public, so I don't think there are any dumb questions because someone out there is thinking exactly, whatever we're thinking at that time. So you're probably representing someone in the community when you ask it. So I wouldn't be concerned.
Well, I reviewed those previous questions, and a lot of them had to maybe do with planning and zoning and stuff. And so, and some very specific questions that I wouldn't come up with on my own, but I want to give you an example of a question that I thought about asking. Are you guys ready to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And this is the one that I'm not sure if I can ask it or if I should or whatever, but I see relevancy in it. The question is, does capitalism coexist with environmentalism? And please provide examples in your work.
I mean, it's out there for legal representation, but I think it speaks to the values of the firm, and that's kind of important in terms of East Lansing, because I flatter myself to think that we're a fairly unique community with unique concerns. So
yeah, and I'd just say, I do think that certain questions in terms of like culture have a place in the conversation too. I think that we're generally a city that wants to or has a priority on helping, right? And so I think that when it comes down to it, if we have a conversation about like and I'll go back to a previous question, right, that said sorry, I'm pulling it up. The third question says, give us an example of a time when you negotiated an agreement for a client municipality to resolve a complicated issue without litigation, right? And I mean, that can be construed in many different ways, but one of the ways that I view that question is talk to us about a time that you could have gotten into a legal battle, but didn't feel necessary, right? And so I think that's important, and I think it's also important to have a city attorney that shares the values of the council, and I think that culture questions are not out of the ballpark. We might want to add one in. So I had a go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, I was just thinking, East Lansing has ordinances that are, social justice based. We have an equality ordinance, which is currently under legal attack right now. So I think that that's actually very pertinent to our situation and our need in our legal representation.
So I had the question down that the city manager had said, I think general question of give us your background and experience as it relates to being the city attorney of East Lansing. I think that it kind of does, just go into you're reading the RFPs, right? But it also gives them an opportunity to the point of the first, question that was on the former interview questions, tell us about stuff that wasn't necessarily in your RFP process. So they can give us, an elevator pitch. I think that's, important as an opportunity to do. I always like the question on zoning in general, just, giving us an example of, and I'm trying to pull up the thing right now where I have it written down. Give us an example of a zoning case that you or your firm handled that resulted in a favorable decision for your client municipality, and an example of a zoning case that you or your firm handled that did not have a favorable result. I thought that question was really good last time through. So that's one of my suggested ones. And, I think that give us an example of a time when you negotiated an agreement that didn't involve litigation is also a good question as well. And then specifically a question on development in general. When I was looking at the former questions, the one that popped out to me, of course, when we're talking about a lot of developments that are coming into the city of East Lansing, is developers approach the city with a plan to redevelop a parcel of property, which has been contaminated as a result of its former use as a gas station. The developer requests that the city provide tax increment financing for the cleanup and other related activities. What factors do you recommend the council consider in making a determination on the request? A knowledge background, tax increment financing, a little bit of a open-ended question in that, not necessarily like what do you advise, but what factors do you recommend? I think is helpful, because tax increment financing is a difficult, item. And, I think that we all have a good amount of questions on each individual, proposal that comes to us. So those are kind of my few questions that I put on there as things that I wanted to see, but I'm open to other conversations. Go ahead, Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, I think elements of question number 2, where it talks about understanding the city charter and that whole thing, and then kind of the spirit or the will of council or the staff when those things come into conflict, maybe asking questions around that. And then that could maybe get us to Councilperson Watson's questions around, like, that would kind of give us a sense of their personality. Like if we're in conflict, or something city staff wants is in conflict with the city charter or city ordinances, how do you what do you do with that? It's a little broader question than that, but just something around that maybe gets us to that culture question, or that kind of getting a sense of their personality from question number 2. If we kind of revamp it a little bit.
So if you revamped it, what would it look like? Then I might go to Councilmember Watson.
Yeah, the importance of enforcing the city charter and ordinance, even when enforcement may be contrary to the outcomes desired by council or city staff. I don't have I can work on that and see where I'd go with that. And
all right, I'll come back to you.
It's around relationships is basically how it's written out. Like, what does that look like? How do you manage those relationships? Or that's how they finish it up. Relationships between city council, city attorney, city council, and city manager. Some questions on that because particularly for the people who don't have municipal experience, they may not know how to manage those or navigate those relationships, which it seems like they're pretty important.
Yep. So. Well, I'm going to come back to you, write something up if you want to update some things, and then I'm going to come back to you. So watch out for it. Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. Tied to that, and perhaps one way of getting to part of that question is what would you do if you had two council members giving you conflicting requests or asking for conflicting advice?
Councilmember Watson, did you have something based on this conversation so far? I wanted to make sure we were following up.
Can I go over my questions?
Yeah.
All right. My ideas on questions. So there's 5 of them.
Okay.
One of them I stated. So one of them is our nation and community is facing a racial reckoning that's exploded after the killing of George Floyd in the hands of police. Many organizations have taken stands both inside and outside of their organization. What, if anything, has your firm done during this time? The next question is, diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just words in this city. What racial justice work has your firm been involved in, and how does diversity show in your firm, and how does inclusion matter? And the next one is, I have been asked as a new council person about the decision to discontinue the current attorney's contract. The city of East Lansing recently voted to, I think I just rephrased it, recently voted to discontinue our current city attorney's contract. Why do you think this happened? And the final question idea from me was, what will be the hardest parts of working for the city of East Lansing?
Sorry, I'm writing.
If I had to pick my, oh, go ahead. What's that?
Sorry, I'm writing it down. I'm going to make sure that
Yeah, and obviously, I super value, and it's very important that we ask some 1 or 2 questions along the lines of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, good. Second that opinion. Would we be able to? You know what? Before I say anything, I'm going to go to Mayor Pro Tem, and then I'm going to go to Councilmember Babcock to give me some ideas on questions, and then, yeah, I'm going to try and compile and condense.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Are you asking me for my ideas about specific questions? I guess I read through the list of suggested questions that were used last time and was actually fairly content with that. I do think that Councilmember Watson's point that, you know, we are in the middle of a pretty big cultural realignment in the city, which is including going through our criminal codes and kind of deciding what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. And I think having strong legal advice that is aware of the national conversation on criminal justice reform is going to be a really important part of that. So I think that that is a really critical thing to address in the interview. I think you're absolutely right on that, Dana. I think I'm trying to think of things that have come up that I mean, the other thing is the legal responses that we've had in terms of coronavirus. I think that we have, that's kind of one of the points where I've been frustrated. Just trying to navigate policing private property and behavior, right? Which is generally something that we have not encouraged our laws to do in this country and in this state. But we're in a situation where we really do need to have some level of control on private property and over people's personal behavior. And where to draw that line and how hard to enforce is stuff that I am going to critically rely on our legal counsel to guide me on. And so I think adding a question about corona response is probably a really good idea. I'm not exactly sure how that should be phrased. So I can kind of, if you need me to come up with a specific wording for that, I can kind of hash things out a little bit. But essentially just, you know, we're faced with a pandemic where we need to have some level of control over personal behavior, which is not something that we've traditionally really tried to police. And so we're going to, you know, how does your experience guide your advice on that? That's not good. If you need me to do that, I can do that. Or you can craft a question on that theme. Sorry, that was really awkward. Anyway, we need to talk about coronavirus.
Okay, so I have all right. So, Councilmember Babcock, going back to you with list of potential questions or ideas for potential questions.
Thank you. One thing I would like to have firms answer is how they're going to handle the criminal prosecution angle. East Lansing is unusual because we have criminal prosecution handled by an outside attorney and a library, which also most cities don't have. So I would like more definitive answers on handling the prosecution.
Do you have an idea for a question on that?
How will you handle the prosecution 54B? And have you spoken with other firms that you may subcontract with, or have you identified someone within your firm who will handle that? If so, what are their experiences, or what are you looking for?
Right. Okay. Keep going. Yeah.
I would phrase something on the coronavirus, perhaps, what are the opportunities for a city to enact or enforce ordinances dealing with the coronavirus? We want to know if they see opportunities for us to act on that, and being cognizant of the fact that they have to be enforceable as well. I very much support Councilmember Watson's proposal that we address equity. However, I would scratch the questions about why a law firm thinks Yaden's contract is terminated. I don't see that going forward. I would also scrap the question about what they think the hardest part of the job is. I think that's a good question for an employee who's going to be doing something day to day, but this is pulled back a bit. It's more of a consultant role, as Councilmember Bacon said. And I don't think that advances us. Right now, those are my big two.
Great. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm actually gonna ask the city manager as well. City attorney is gonna be working with our staff hand in hand, and I would like to know what priorities they would like to see out of every firm. So, are there specific things that you feel that we need to ask in these conversations?
I think you hit upon them, a number of them, which is response time for you guys, response time for staff, how long to answer a phone call, how quickly can they come to a meeting, because that happens pretty frequently for different departments that are in need, and they're stopped up until they can get an answer from the city attorney. So if the city attorney says a day, that's a problem. If they say you pick up the phone and call me on my cell, that's kind of the answer you'd want. I think that a dedicated person as your city attorney, how much time will they have? Will they have another contract that they're running? Because City of East Lansing will take a lot of time for somebody. It's going to take, I think it's going to take a full-time dedicated person.
Yeah.
Plus the court stuff.
Right.
You guys want the same person in the council room every night, I think.
Yeah.
You don't want them swapping that person out. Someone has to take vacation, of course, but generally speaking, you want the same person for consistency. And then, that's basically the same stuff you guys already asked, just responsiveness and how they would get back to us, and could they attend in-person meetings on a quick basis. And
okay. So this is what I have on that. And I'm gonna ask for some kind of council agreement on this, because I do think this is a priority. I think we've all mentioned response time. Just give me 1 second. Oh, Councilmember Babcock, did you have something? Okay.
I can wait a minute. Thanks.
Yeah. So we can say, tell us about your response time to both council and staff, your availability during any time of the day. How quickly can you come to a meeting, and would you have one or multiple people as the points of contact for the city? Something along those lines. Does that make sense? Councilmember Bacon?
We need to frame that, because I read that kind of in the looking at it, I thought some people were going like, well, we're going to offer you all this suite of things of what we're saying we want. I don't want to take them down the wrong road. Then they're thinking, oh, they're wanting us to, they want paralegals, they want this, they want that. So we bring the suite of services to you, and we're going to actually narrow that, where we're looking for a person, a backup, and maybe a backup to the backup. And that's kind of what we're getting at. We're looking for exclusivity or, that kind of thing. And we might take them down the wrong road. That's my concern with kind of,
maybe you can
tell them our expectation.
Maybe you can frame it and say that the position of city attorney is particularly important to us. How will we have access to that person, their response time, their consistency of attendance? Because then you're getting to your point, which is we're not trying to ask how deep your bench is. We're trying to ask your key player, how accessible is your key player for us? Will they be always available? Are you going to say, call my associate, call my associate?
George, are you comfortable writing that question down and then reading it back?
I'll have to go back. Once you say it one time, it's gone.
I know that. I was trying to write it because I actually think that was a really good way to say that.
I will do that definite tomorrow morning. Okay. I'll get an answer. I'll get it written down.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a cogent question that spoke to my coronavirus thing. Sorry, it takes me a little while to assemble my thoughts. So the question is, we are facing a global pandemic and have relied on emergency orders to encourage personal responsibility in our residents to slow the spread of the virus. Do you have experience with emergency plans and the overlapping jurisdictions between local, county, state, and federal government when it comes to minimizing risk to our residents and assisting in the recovery from emergency situations? Does that seem like it kind of sums up our current situation?
I'm going to go around the horn here. George, Councilmember Bacon, Councilmember Babcock, Councilmember Watson, anything? Not specifically.
I think.
At least, oh, okay. I thought.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Watson, please.
I was just going to suggest to add COVID specific and or emergency plans in general and or COVID specific.
Okay, I think I can work that in there. Lisa?
Yeah, I would actually leave emergencies in general because God only knows what the next one's going to be, right? At some point, what I'd like to hear at some point, and maybe not the interview, this is asking a lot for an interview, but moving beyond emergency powers. But that may be, that might not be a fair conversation to have in a 45-minute interview. How would you structure the ordinance to blah, 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 blah. I'm guessing that many of their municipalities are asking the same questions, and all they need to do is pick up a paper. So I can probably hold off on that until at least their first meeting.
City Manager, do you have something?
I was just going to say one quick thing onto Dana's points earlier about her questions on equity. I think it was her second question that I thought was particularly relevant, because you're trying to get at the firm, because they're going to do what you say. You direct their work. So you direct the content. I mean, you say how they're supposed to do their job, but she said, how did your firm, what have they done in regards to equity and promoting equity? So that gets to them as an employer. Do they hire? Do they recruit for diversity? Do they promote for diversity? So I think that was a particularly good question, because it says, do the values of your firm as an employer match what we want? But the rest, and so I think that was probably, if you were to ask one question on diversity and equity, I think that's probably the best one, just because it hits upon how they function as an employer and what they do. Because they're an employer too. They hire, they promote.
Dana, would you mind sorry, Councilmember Watson, would you mind reading off that question one more time?
Yes, I'll read it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just words in the city. What racial justice work has your firm been involved in? How does diversity show in your firm? And how does inclusion matter?
To how to show it in your firm, I think is a key point.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that says, what have you done to promote that as an employer, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Are we, I actually, I want to, I want to get something accomplished. I want to get a question in. So are we actually all good with that being one of the questions that we asked? Is that okay?
Yes. Yes.
Dana, are you all right with that? I mean, it's your
Is
question.
it the full question? Is it the full question?
Yes, I would imagine so.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Verbalize was my thumb.
Yep, no, I got it. All right. So that's good. I think we have that there. I think a question on response time specifically. And I think what George said, that he will most likely have to just watch back the meeting. Is that's okay? Are we okay with what he basically worded, which is, you know, the position itself is very key. You know, we care about the bench, but you know, this is a city that has issues come up. Often, I think what your actual explanation of it also might, you know, lend to the experience too of just saying, like, oftentimes staff has, you know, questions that come up that mean that they have to halt until they get an answer to that question, right? I think that makes sense to mention. So
yeah, I think it related to that for the key person, for the principal person who's appointed city attorney, how will the access? But I'll get it. I'll formulate it right.
Okay. Are folks okay with that type of question being on there? I'm getting a nod from Ron. I'm getting
yes, I am.
From Councilmember Babcock, and I'm getting a yes from Councilmember Watson. I think a thumbs up from the Mayor Pro Tem. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a question of response time as well. Are we okay with a question specifically on that is general in the beginning that says, tell us about your background and experience as it relates to being a city attorney of East Lansing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that all right with folks?
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting yes from everybody. Councilmember Watson, I want to make sure that I.
How many questions are we at right now?
That would be the third.
Oh, we're only at 3 questions. So I was kind of more game to bumping that maybe down some, or maybe being more specific, only because attorneys are great with defending and describing. And so, but I know also that first question can help folks feel comfortable and acclimate themselves and stuff. And so, but I was kind of leaning towards asking a different question, but if everyone else wants to ask that question first, I'm in support.
Okay. Feel free to discuss the thing that you would rather do. Although I will say, if we're going to 5, we do have 2 extra slots right here, you know, for questions as well. But
I'd like to hear Councilperson Watson's opener. If she did you have a different opening question? Yeah. I'd like to.
I did like the question about the RFP. What would you like to add to the RFP?
I mean, that serves, I think, a similar purpose too.
Yeah. Okay. And I like that because it gives them time to focus more on maybe something they feel like they left out or something they want to expand on, as opposed to talking in general about awesomeness.
Go ahead, or Mayor Pro Tem.
I actually think that's a really great idea because the RFPs are fairly thorough, the responses are fairly thorough, and they're mostly concerned with their experience in municipal law. So I think that rather than have a good chunk of our interview time take care of something that we've got in front of us in paper form or tablet form, that allowing them to speak about their personal experience, but in a way that might add to what we already have is probably a great way to do that.
All right, then I am going to say that we have some consensus on that as the first question that we asked. So is there anything that you didn't include in your RFP response? that okay with folks? Please speak up. Honestly, I'm compiling, so trying to make sure
It's open-ended. It gives an opportunity, kind of to Lisa's point, of someone who maybe didn't speak well enough to their municipal experience and maybe has like, oh, I wish I had included this, or I failed to include this in my, prior. So yeah, it gives an open opportunity. I like it as an icebreaker, so to speak. So.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And I think it would be good to ask, what would you add, as opposed to, is there anything you would add?
What would you? Okay.
Oh, that's real. That's lawyery right there.
Hire on Dana. So at this point, I think we have three. That's the what would you add, the DEI question, and the accessibility question. We have two more quote unquote slots for this. There had been some interest in criminal prosecution, coronavirus specifically. I still think a technical question or two on either zoning, development, anything in relation to that. I would agree, actually, a technical question on prosecution might be necessary, like how you handle that, but that's kind of where my mind is at in terms of these last two questions. Is I think that it would be good if we got some technicality in it. Go ahead, George.
I was going to say that I think you could do all three. Do one on zoning, do one on development, and do one on prosecution, and that gives you 6, which is great. I think that's certainly.
Zoning.
I just think 5 to come up with a basic number, but 6 is great too.
So would we be good with development, zoning, prosecution as 3 questions? Go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa, you're muted.
Sorry, side conversation with a much
Okay.
better half.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
I thought I was.
I have a quick question for George. George, I'm fairly cognizant of the fact that as council members, we only see like a fairly narrow window of the city attorney's work done on the city's behalf. Would you be able to give us kind of a general breakdown of like where those duties lie in terms of
Yeah, I could certainly.
have we missed something big, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I can certainly look at the questions that are here and see if it's relevant, if there's anything more relevant for staff to tweak them, and then but going from what you already have here in front of you, which are pretty good, you know what I mean? And then just recommend those to Aaron tomorrow or Monday.
Okay.
That helps.
Sounds good. I wouldn't want to kind of accidentally leave somebody out that had a heavy reliance on legal advice.
Great. Okay, so I think we have some fairly good consensus on this. Is that correct? And then honestly.
Does this include some time for council members to ask individual responses as well?
Yeah, so that's the next thing that I was going to address. I do think in this case specifically, you should all consider individual follow-up questions for these proposals. What I would suggest to them, and maybe this means that we actually have like 55 minutes instead of 45 minutes per interview because we're asking 6 questions instead. But George, you look.
I think 20 minutes for questions, just as a guide. If you had 3 to 4 minutes, 3 minutes per question for 6, 18 to 20 minutes, you should easily have 20 more minutes for discussion, and you're still at 40 to 45 minutes. So I think that you will get through it. If they're succinct at all, you'll get through those questions pretty well.
Great.
That's by no means too many questions at all.
Okay, great. So I think that it's important that, obviously, to be fair, if we're asking these questions of everybody, I think these are good questions for every applicant, but I will have individual questions in terms of cost structure on some of these, in terms of accessibility on others, and some things. So I think that we're due to get a little bit of prepared performance, right, when we're talking about these questions publicly before. So I think it's very, very valuable for individual council members to come up with questions that we're not talking about here, so we get some realer answers. Like, for instance, Councilmember Watson, you had some points in there that weren't necessarily addressed in these 5 questions. I have some points on zoning, that I don't know if it'll be fully addressed in this whatever question we're basing this off of. So I just think it is important to make sure that we're, keeping folks on their toes a little bit, honestly, with this, because things are going to come up and this is an important process. Does that make sense to everybody? Go ahead, Councilmember Babcock.
It does make sense, and I think I think it's a quality we're looking for. How do they respond to things that come up rather suddenly and change quickly? And I think when you're interviewing lawyers, particular lawyers who are going to have to deal with whatever comes up at city council, that's exactly a quality that should be tested.
All right, anybody have anything else?
I was wondering, is the emergency plan question that Mayor Pro Tem asked, is that on the list?
That is not on the list as of right now.
All right. And I'm sorry, did someone say something?
Oh, I was interrupting you, Dana. I'm sorry. I said I can use my personal time for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. And the zoning and planning, do you think we should pull in David and ask his just feedback on current questions that we should ask now or going towards the future questions?
Yeah, I'd be very happy.
I plan to do that with the 3 questions, so I can do that quick work tomorrow and present that to the mayor, and the mayor can consider that.
Okay, awesome. And my last question is, there's 5 of us, and I heard the minute breakdown, but can you tell me again? So we're at the end of the interview. There's 5 of us that can ask questions and get responses. So what does that look like time frame wise?
So what I'd probably try to do, just thinking about it generally, is I'd probably try to go around the horn specifically with each individual and make sure that everybody is able to ask at least one question of like a follow-up question. And what I'd hope to do is, if you have follow-up questions based on the more scripted ones that we're putting out there right now, you would ask those then, just because I do think, again, follow-up questions on this, a little bit less scripted, more organic is important for this kind of conversation. And I'm hoping that we can move efficiently. And honestly, my main concern with this was, would we take too much time with these 6, right? And we wouldn't have much opportunity for this. But I think if we set expectations in the beginning of the interview, I think that will be helpful. And we're talking about it right here, right now, where we're setting expectations. These are going to be 45 minutes long, and I'm assuming, and I'm fairly safe to assume this, that staff is going to relay that to those applicants that we're interviewing.
Great.
Okay, everybody. I think this is good. I think that we've got some good ideas flowing, got some good candidates, and yeah, that is it. City Manager, am I missing anything else that we need to discuss?
Nope, I don't think so at this time. Thank you.
Great. So
I have one final question.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Just one final question. Is there a requirement for how many people can come to the interview?
Oh, like from the firm?
Yeah.
I think in the past they've brought their team in, so.
Okay. All right.
Great. Okay, guys. This all makes sense, and I appreciate everybody being on the phone for this. We are ending our meeting now at 8:28. That's not bad.
Not bad at all.
No, it's
Thanks
not.
for being on. Look forward to next
Thanks.
week.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Now adjourned.
Thank you.
Yes.